Hello and welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove, joined by John Gibson, and we bring you a special episode, a sad episode, because we're going to pay tribute to Willie McFaul, who died last week at the age of 82. A Newcastle United legend, both on and off the pitch. Very sad news last Friday when it was confirmed that he'd sadly passed away, and we felt it only right to pay tribute to a man, as I say, is a proper Newcastle United legend. John, welcome back. We always hate doing these type of episodes because it means we've lost someone so dearly. It wasn't too long ago that we did a special on Wayne Davies, and we've lost another one of the 1969 Fairs Cup winning side.
Yeah, I mean, it's very sad for me because the passing of time, it's inevitable, but you start losing players more and more through the passing of time. And these are stepping stones in history. What we're talking about with, John McNamee went recently. What we're talking about with John McNamee and Wayne Davies and Willie McFaul is the only Newcastle United side ever to win a European competition. And when you lose people like that, and we'd already lost Jackie Sinclair, then you treasure them and you do feel it, because without a shadow of doubt, Willie McFaul is an absolute giant in Newcastle United's history. There's no question about that. I mean, how many people these days can serve one club unbroken for 22 years? I mean, he never left. He was 22 years at Newcastle United, from September 1966 to October 1988. 22 years as a player, junior coach, reserve team coach, first team coach, manager. Never left the club, seamless. Now that, I mean, how many, outside of thinking about people like Alex Ferguson and perhaps Arsene Wenger, you don't get that sort of record. I think Bob Paisley probably had that, talking off the top of my head, at Liverpool, because he was a player, reserve team, and he was coached Shanks, of course, and he was a North East guy. But you can count them on one hand, and Willie's one of those. And for me, I'm paying tribute to a Newcastle United giant, but also to a personal friend, and that makes it a double whammy for me.
Yeah, it certainly does. Talk to us then just about your initial reaction when you heard the news that he'd sadly passed away. I suppose one of, as you say, a massive loss and a massive emotion.
Yes, it was all of that, and somewhere way back at the back of my mind as well, there was just a tiny little bit of relief, because I knew how much he'd struggled fitness-wise, health-wise, of recent times. It was very different for a very proud man. It was an athlete all his life, and life had become difficult for him. He was in the end of life care just before he died, and it's a tough old time, but it doesn't matter how prepared you might be for an inevitability. When it comes, it's still a sledgehammer to you, because it marks the end of so many things, and Willie's passing does that. And it was amazing, because I was up at the match, as we all were, on Sunday, and everybody I seemed to bump into was somebody to do with Willie. I mean, I was talking to Bob Moncur, who was his skipper. I was talking to Frank Clark, who was up because we were playing Nottingham Forest, and he played in the first cup side with him. Alan Foggin, who was 19 and scored the winning goal in the second leg, he was there, and we were talking about him. And even John Anderson, who I did a gig in town with prior to kickoff, when John was a player, Willie was one of the coaches at St James's. So they all had stories to tell, and everybody was reminiscing about a genuinely nice and honest, good professional. And he served Newcastle when they won the European Fairs Cup, the only time they've done that. 69, 74, he was in the FA Cup final side. I mean, he made over 300 odd appearances, and you'll have the stats for Newcastle United, having arrived just as a rookie out of Linfield in the Irish League, and 23-year-old, which to come out the Irish League, sort of a part-time footballer, etc., to a big first division club, we were then first division, is quite late in your career, 23. And he must be unique because Newcastle played Linfield in a friendly match at St James's Park, and he let in 7 goals, and Joe Harvey signed him because he was brilliant. This is a goalkeeper that let in 7 goals, but mind, there would have been a cricket score without him, and some of the saves he pulled off was stupendous. And he signed him for £7,000, and there wasn't money more well spent than that was. Took him a couple of seasons to really establish himself as a first team regular, but from there on in, he was the business.
Talk to us about the man, the character, because he was quite shy in many ways, quite quiet. What do you remember of him?
He was great fun, away from the cameras and away from being interviewed. Go out for a night out with him, go for a drink, and he knew I had parked my typewriter and my pen outside of the nightclub. I wasn't taking it in with me. And he was as funny as the day is long. He was a very, very witty man, a very warm man, loved friendships. There was when I say there was a clique of players at Newcastle, I don't mean a clique in the worst sense. I mean, there was a band of brothers that included the Irishmen like Willie McFaul and David Craig, and Frank Clark become part of that later after the Fairs Cup. Super Mac did. And, I often went out with Clarkie and Bob Monk and Willie together, and he was terrific. I mean, officially, when you dealt with him, when he was a manager, he was very much a politician. He handled directors well. He wasn't flip. He was hugely respectful. He wasn't a Brian Clough sort of manager who would be very confrontational with directors and confrontational with everybody. Cloughie, I mean, bless him, that was his style. He was confrontational with his mates and his team, of course, his players. But that wasn't the way Willie played it. But people that were around him, he was a bit like Bob Paisley, who come up through the ranks. Bob Paisley had been at Liverpool for years. I don't mean he was just as successful as Bob, because Bob as a manager was unique. He won all the European Cups, etc. But he was that type of manager. He had come through the ranks, as Paisley had. Paisley never expected to become a manager. I mean, I knew Bob well, and he never expected to become a manager. He always thought he'd be Shanks number 2. When all of a sudden Shanks packed in. Willie McFall was never looking to be a manager. Just all of a sudden, Jack Charlton quit after a pre-season friendly when he got booed by 5,000 fans because that's all that was in the ground. He walked out and said, "I'm not having this." And it was a pre-season friendly, for goodness sake. We're just about to start. Willie was in-house. Willie got promotion. And I always remember, you've got to bear in mind that Willie had, at this time, served about 18 years non-stop from being a player. And I gave Willie a bell on the morning he was confirmed as Newcastle manager. And when he picked up the phone, I said, "Hey, pal, how are you doing?" I said, "You do realise you're one day closer to the sack now?" And he burst out laughing. And that's the sort of humour we had with him, although he was very different if you were talking to him on the record. But of course, I mean, he could have been a coach at Newcastle for the rest of his life. But once you get in the hot seat, it doesn't matter how good you are. I mean, Cloughie got the sack at Leeds. Bobby Robson got the sack at Newcastle. I mean, it doesn't matter how good a manager you are. One day you will get the sack. And he says, "Hey, well, thanks for your good wishes, Gibbo." That was very kind.
You mentioned there him getting appointed after Jack Charlton walks out and how he was never looking for that job. So talk to us about the kind of hour beforehand when maybe the rumours and the whispers are starting to circle and they're going to appoint Willie here, and you're going, really? Surely not. I mean, what was kind of the mood within the newsroom when you were hearing these things?
I mean, it was staggering, first and foremost, that Jack walked out, although with hindsight, it was typical of Jack. But it was staggering that he walked out because it was after a pre-season friendly and there was only 5,000 in the ground. But you got to bear in mind, while he'd had good season with us, Jack, his style of football was never going to endear him to Geordie's, because it was just back to front as quickly as you could and then try to get a shot off. I mean, there was nothing pretty about it, but it was effective. And therefore, he wasn't going to win over fans. That's why there was only 5,000 in the ground against Sheffield United, because they didn't like this style of football. And when we lost that game, they went crackers. Now, Jack was a man of great pride. And fair dues, he was a World Cup winner, and he went on after Newcastle United to manage the Republic of Ireland, and look at the job he did there. But his style of football was very good for the Republic of Ireland, because when you're playing bigger sides, be it England or France or Italy or Brazil, then playing his sort of minimal football and get the ball up quick, work the treat, and he got a load of good results, and it was perfect. Wasn't perfect for us. And he just turned around in the dressing room after he walked in and he says, "I've had enough of this, I'm off." Turned on his heel and left. Went to see the board of directors and told them, "I'm quitting, I'm not having this." But didn't want any compensation, any money. You know, the managers get the sack today and they become instant millionaires because the payoff on the contract. Jack was very good that way. He didn't hold the club to ransom whatsoever. But you're in pre-season, and you're going to start to look for a manager. And then they suddenly looked round and thought, "There's Willie. He's already here. He knows exactly how this club works. He knows exactly how the players work. He's their first-team coach, for goodness sake." So in the way, the whole world was staggered when Bob Paisley got the job at Liverpool to follow Shanks, because Shanks was charismatic and Bob Paisley was cardigan on and the little round face, everybody's uncle. But he was there. When Shanks walked out, he was there. Willie was there. And Willie professionally was very good for them, but he ran into a bad time as a manager, Willie, because Newcastle had set the trend as a club by already selling. They had the crown jewels, which were the three Geordie young superstars who were going to become legends, Waddle, Beardsley and Gascoigne, and they'd already sold Waddle under Big Jack. And during, so the pattern was set, and of course the minute Beardsley and then Gascoigne see that, they think, well, this club's going somewhere, isn't it? They're selling their best players. They've just got rid of Waddle. Why, if I stick round, I mean, this club's going nowhere, and what's more, it's going nowhere fast. So they are quite happy and are looking to go. And they were both sold on Willie McFaul's watch. And while he spent money to bring players in, it didn't quite work for him. And he went to Liverpool and Mirandina scored the winner, and a week later at home to Coventry they lost, and he had lost his job. But I would much prefer at this stage to talk about him as a player, because we're paying tribute to him, and he did well for Newcastle and was effective and become a manager. But where he become a legend was as a player.
Yeah, like we said, more than 300 appearances, 386 appearances for Newcastle between 1966 and 1975. Not the tallest of goalkeepers by any stretch, John. And he had a style which, in your tribute, you praised.
Absolutely. I mean, his official height was given as 5'9". Now, even in Willie's day, that was small for a keeper. I mean, these days, it's almost impossible for a keeper to be that size. I mean, you know, you've got to be over 6 foot. And the goalkeeper that just played for Union in Brussels against us was 6'9". You know, and this fella was a foot smaller than that. But there was two things about him. He was very agile. He was spring-heeled, and he was a wonderful shot stopper. He was an absolutely gorgeous shot stopper. But the amazing thing about him, and I did. You're right. I did mention it, was that despite being 5'9" in a crowded penalty area, he didn't punch the ball away. He caught it. And what he used to say, and it was language of the day, but he was living in the day. He used to shout to defenders when the penalty area was crowded and the ball was coming across from a corner or free kick or whatever, "Let the dog see the rabbit." In other words, get out the way and let me come and I'll catch it. And the amazing thing is that he didn't punch it. He caught it, and 9 times out of 10 he did catch it. And for his size, that was quite phenomenal, and he was capable of producing wonderful, wonderful match performances for us. There's 3 games in all. I mean, I think I saw literally every single game he played for Newcastle, because at the time I was travelling with Newcastle United. That was my full-time job for the Chronicle. And when I look back on Willie and say, you say to me, what's his highlights? What are the milestones that are there in Willie's playing career? And for me, there were 3. Uh, all key games and all producing joy at the end of them. The first one was in 1969 in the famous Fairs Cup run, semi-finals away to Glasgow Rangers in front of 70,000. They are awarded a penalty. Willie Penman takes a penalty and Willie saves it. And in front of over 70,000 mad Glaswegians who had a couple of sherbets before they come in, that was absolutely crucial. That got us a 0-0 and inevitably set us up to win at home in the second leg and make the final. And we did win at home the second leg 2-0. But that performance at Rangers, and funny enough, just while I'm talking about it, the second leg when we won 2-0, you will remember from the history books, Andrew, that we were brought off for about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes because of the crowd, because the Rangers fans, once we were 2-0 up and they knew they were out, the Rangers fans went, and they got to, it's amazing what you could take on the terraces in those days, Andrew. They'd all taken brown ale bottles on the terraces and were drinking brown ale out of the bottle while watching the game with their tammies on and with their kilts on. And of course, the minute they were obviously out, they start flinging these brown ale bottles at the pitch and at us. We were defending the Gallagher end. All the Rangers supporters were in the Gallagher end. So all these balls are flying, all these bottles are flying over Willie's head. And the first thing Willie did was think, bugger this, and start running up the pitch to get to the halfway line and get in the tunnel. And I remember Bob Moncur and Frank Clark telling me they're standing there and they see Willie sprinting past them and they say, where the hell are you going, Willie? What's up? And then all of a sudden they saw a bottle and they were away. And by the time, there's a very famous photograph in the Chronicle Library, by the time the game restarted, Willie's left-hand post, all the empty brown ale bottles were piled up against the post and they were almost as tall as Willie. The brown ale bottles by his left-hand post. But that was the first match he excelled in. Then there was the final itself, the second leg when we went to Budapest. We were 3-0 ahead. But in the first half, they were a wonderful, wonderful side, Uzbekistan, the best side in Europe, it was said at the time. At half-time, we were 2-0 down, and we were getting battered, and it would have been 6, but for Willie. He was absolutely sensational. So we're still leading 3-2 on aggregate at half-time. But we should have been out of it. And Bob scores a goal within minutes of going back on and went to win it. And his third great appearance was in the 1974 FA Cup semi-final against Burnley at Hillsborough. When Burnley again battered us, we had taken 3 matches to beat Nottingham Forest because of a pitch invasion, and we were exhausted by the time we went to play Burnley, having had 3 goes with emotional as well as physical pressure. We were absolutely exhausted, and Willie played them on his own. And then in 2 breakaways, Malcolm MacDonald scored 2 outrageous goals. But as he said, and I said at the time, and bear in mind how close a friend Malcolm MacDonald is, there was only one real Super Mac that day, and it wasn't the bloke that scored the 2 goals. It was the goalkeeper.
Wonderful accolade that, given the the size of that game and what Malcolm did to get Newcastle to the final. In terms of Newcastle United's greatest ever goalkeeper, John, and we've been fortunate enough to have quite a few. Jimmy Lawrence, even before your time, is one name that's
Amazing, isn't it? That it was before my time, but incredibly it was. But I mean, you just get his figures out the record book to know how good he must have been.
yeah. You got Shea Given as another name. Ronnie Simpson you could point to as well. I mean, where does Willie McFall rank in terms of the greatest ever Newcastle United goalkeeper?
Very, very high. I mean, Shea Given's my number one of all time, and I've said that, and I've gone on podcasts with you when you've asked me to pick them, and I've picked Shea. Obviously, just by the record books, Jimmy Lawrence, who holds the record number of appearances for Newcastle United, etc., is quite exceptional. And then you're looking at the two goalkeepers in the 50s cup finals, which was Jack Fairbrother and Ronnie Simpson. And Ronnie Simpson, was quite really a bit of a ringer for Willie McFall, or shall I say it's the other way on, because Ronnie was there first. Willie McFall, slight build, not tall, great shot stopper. All those three things apply to Ronnie Simpson and also apply to Willie McFall. But, if you're picking your top 6 goalkeepers of all time at Newcastle United, I think Willie McFall would be in those because Shea Given. I tell you, the one thing Willie McFall did better than Shea Given, and that was plucking the ball out of the air in a crowded penalty area on crosses. Shea was a great shot stopper, but he didn't dominate his box. If he had a weakness, and everybody has a weakness, a slight weakness, he didn't dominate on crosses. Willie McFall did.
So there we go. I mean, like we say, a host of names, and I'm really intrigued to get your thoughts on this. So do get comments, do get on social media and let me and John know where Willie McFall ranks in terms of Newcastle United's greatest ever goalkeeper. As you said, John, he was here for a long, long time, both as player, coach, and then manager. And we have to think about the fact that he either must have really loved his job or what he was doing, because I mean that's a long time. People get bored. You want a fresh change. You want a direction in your career. But he was here, and had he not got the job of replacing Big Jack, he probably would, as you said, stayed on as coach under whoever came in to replace Jack Charlton. So what was it, do you think, that made him stay for as long as he did?
He fell in love, and bear in mind that I know with some players that come to Newcastle, they came to Newcastle and suddenly married a Newcastle girl and loved the club and all that. But that was another reason for staying here, because they married a Newcastle girl. Eileen, his wife, who's a lovely, lovely lady, top of the pops, absolute terrific lady. But she's Irish too, so it wasn't the fact that he'd suddenly met a girl here and that kept him here. He just loved the club. He adored the club. He got it with the fans. He got it with the club. He was ambitious to want to do well, but not obsessively so. He would have continued to be a sponge man for the rest of his life if this opportunity hadn't come to him. So he wasn't going to knock on doors and say, you better make me manager or else I'm going to go. And then off he went, etc., and become manager all over the place, like managers do. Steve Bruce, everybody's, you've had a dozen clubs. And more clubs than Jack Nicklaus, as the famous phrase is. But he wasn't that sort of guy at all. And really, after Newcastle, he helped Guam, the small country playing in the World Cup qualifiers, and he did a bit of work for the Irish FA, etc., etc. But he never took another big English club after us. And he was just a Newcastle United man. And very quickly after coming, we won the European Fairs Cup. He loved Joe. He won the Fairs Cup, a European trophy. He played in an FA Cup final at Wembley, and this was just his second home. He loved the fans, he loved the club, and he loved the area as well. And the whole lot put together, it was a perfect parcel for him. He never looked to go away. And what we've got to remember, one thing that I didn't bring up Andrew, but is a significant part of his time at Newcastle United, was when he was manager at Newcastle United. Him and Supermac combined to make history because between them, Newcastle United signed the first Brazilian ever to play in the Football League, Mirandina. Now that's amazing to think now when all the Brazilians, all the foreign players from all over the world, from South America, that come and play in this country now. But the first Brazilian was Mirandina, who was signed by Willie McFaul, and even more startling was that Mirror's agent over here in England was Supermac, who was running a pub on the south coast at the time, but had been contacted because Mirror wanted to come to uh, Europe, and he'd been contacted by a go-between to see whether he would help that, and he said, of course he would, and he thought of his contacts, and he thought of his old mate at Newcastle. He got in touch. He offered a centre forward, a Brazilian international centre forward to Newcastle with a number 9 Legends history, and it's almost a no-brainer, isn't it? So we signed him. Amazing lad, love him to death. Still see him an awful lot now. Quick as it's possible to be, Mirror. But nothing like a Brazilian, really. He had the touch of a bear trap, and him and Gaza played together, and you had to have 2 footballs on the field because neither would give it up. They just wanted to go. I mean, Gaza just wanted to go on a mazy dribble, and Mirror just wanted to try a shot. Regardless of where he received the ball on the pitch, he would try a shot. But yes, so Willie was involved in that, which will stand for all the time because it's the first Brazilian that's ever played over here. And I think at that time the Football League was 100 years old, and in that stage they'd never signed a Brazilian until Willie and Supermac got together.
You mentioned Gaza as well. He gave him his big.
Oh yes, yeah. Yeah, he played. I mean, he played. He played. He had Gaza on his side. When he had Beardsley on his side, he had Mirandina on his side, Paul Goddard on his side. I mean, they were good players. But to be truthful, the signings that were made as we were losing Beardsley and Gascoigne were never going to be of that quality. We're always going to be judged against that quality. Oh, Newcastle are selling them and getting these. Are these as good as them? No, they're not. So he was always he was always up against it from that point of view. But nothing but happy memories for Willie. And he stayed, 22 years, finished with the sack, as I told him he would do. But, he never got bitter about it. He loved the club until the day he died a week ago. He was Newcastle United, stayed his heart. He never got bitter about. He knew that getting the sack was always part of a manager's job, and he was here so long, and he had so many wonderful memories. And I mean, Joe Harvey thought the world of him. And funny enough, talking about the people that I was with at the game that wanted to talk about Willie and. The guy that took over from Willie at Newcastle United was a guy called Mike Mahoney, who was the goalkeeper in the 1976 League Cup final against Man City at Wembley, which was just 2 years after Willie was goalkeeper in the 74 final. And Mike took over as the goalkeeper, and Mike became a dear friend of mine. He lived just across the road from me in Wickham. And on a Tuesday night, we used to go to a pub in Burnham Field where they had a karaoke on and do Lost in France was the big song at the time. I think Bonnie Tyler. And he went to America and is now back in Bristol. And the first thing I got when I got home on Sunday from the match, phone call, pick it up. Hello. Voice says, hello, Super Goalie here. Never said who it was, but Super Goalie was his nickname. Mike Mahoney, Super Goalie. That's what the fans used to always say. Super Goalie here. Just heard about Willie, and he just wanted to talk about Willie, and because Willie didn't hold a bitterness it Mike taken over because Willie was 33, and he'd become coach of the juniors, and so he was still within the building when Mike Mahoney was here, and Mike Mahoney loved him dearly. but everybody that come into contact, it was very difficult not to like the man.
Yeah, and I guess there's no bigger compliment to pay to Willie McFall than what you've been doing throughout the show with the names you've mentioned who have spoken to you over the last few days and
Oh, made a point of contacting me to speak because they just wanted to express what they felt about Willie with somebody that knew Willie, and not with somebody that might look blank or say, "Oh, well, I've read the history books," but somebody say, "Hey, what about Willie?" And because then he could say, "What about that game in the semi-final? What about this? What about?" And then tell a few Willie McFall stories because there's always the ones you can tell and the ones you can't tell. But what you've got at the end of the day is a very warm man, and we have lost yet another giant. And this happens far too quickly with the passing of time. And a lot of the First Cup team from, as I say, Jackie Sinclair and John McNamee and then Wyn Davies and Willie McFall, and they're two giants. Wyn Davies and Willie McFall of that side. And it's just sad. It's inevitable, the passing of time, but we've got to treasure these people because it's not just a matter of saying, well, we haven't got a good history in terms of winning things, and this guy was part of a winning side. He's still his team's the only team in Newcastle history to win a European competition. But the matter, and fans care. If you serve us well and perform well for us, and I've said that to people that are playing for Newcastle now, and I think Bruno buys into that. It's obvious by the way he is on the field, and certainly Dan Burn knows because he's a Geordie, etc., etc. You buy into that, and you will be treasured for the rest of your life and beyond your life by everybody that can remember anything about you. And Willie McFall was a special man, a special goalkeeper, a loyal man. His loyalty to Newcastle United was ginormous. And you don't get a lot of that these days, Andrew. People leave. You got it with Alan Shearer, but people leave clubs now and move on. It's to their benefit to do so. But loyalty was his middle name, as it was with Shearer and a lot of others that could be mentioned.
Yeah, true servant to Newcastle United, and he'll be dearly, dearly missed. Willie McFall, who sadly died at the age of 82. Thank you to John popping on to the podcast and sharing his thoughts on Willie. To you guys, thank you for watching and listening. Remember to click the link in the podcast description box. Take advantage of your NordVPN exclusive discounted offer. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk if you haven't already to read John's tribute to Willie McFall. I'll also put that link in the podcast description box. Me and John will be back later in the week with a special episode. We're going to bring Gibbo's Corner back for this international break, where we're going to talk about the Newcastle United greats who never received an international cap for their country, or very few caps. And Willie McFall is one of those listed as well, because he received only a handful for Northern Ireland. But check that out over the weekend, and we'll see you guys then.